Sometimes I wonder if people see kindness as weakness. I'm Sarah, 58 years old, and I've spent my entire life putting others before myself. I'm divorced, have been for almost 15 years now, with one son, James, who just turned 32 last month. He and his wife Olivia have given me my only grandchild, little Noah, who's just turned 2. I should be living my golden years in peace, enjoying my role as grandmother, right? That's what I thought too. My story isn't unique. I'm just a woman who worked hard all her life. I put my career on hold when James was born, started working part-time when he started school, and only went back to full-time work when he left for college. I was a nurse for 30 years before retiring last year. I've spent my life caring for others, my patients, my family, my son. It's just who I am. I never complained about the sacrifices. James's father left when our son was 12, and I raised him alone, working extra shifts to make sure he had everything he needed. I remember missing school plays because I couldn't get time off. I remember the nights I cried silently in my bedroom because I was exhausted but still had to be up at 5 a.m. for another shift. But James turned out wonderfully, and that made it all worth it. When James met Olivia 5 years ago, I was thrilled. She seemed perfect, intelligent, ambitious, and she made my son happy. I welcomed her into our small family with open arms. I wanted to be the supportive mother-in-law, not the interfering one you hear about in jokes and stories. The wedding 3 years ago was beautiful. I spent months helping with preparations, staying in the background as much as possible, offering help only when asked. I paid for the rehearsal dinner even though it stretched my budget thin. I wanted everything to be perfect for them, and for a while everything seemed great. Olivia was always polite when we met, though somewhat reserved. I attributed it to her personality. Some people just take time to warm up, and that's perfectly fine. I gave her space, never dropping by unannounced, always calling before visiting. When they announced they were expecting Noah, I was overjoyed. My first grandchild. I offered to help but tried not to be overbearing. Just let me know what you need, I told them repeatedly. That's when things started to change, so subtly at first that I didn't even notice. After Noah was born, I visited them at the hospital with a small gift and flowers. Olivia thanked me but seemed distant. I figured she was just exhausted from childbirth, which was completely understandable. When they came home with the baby, I brought over some homemade meals so they wouldn't have to cook. Olivia accepted them with a tight smile but didn't invite me in. Again, I understood new parents need space. But as weeks passed, a pattern emerged. Whenever I visited, Olivia would immediately find something for me to do. Sarah, would you mind folding this laundry while I feed Noah? Or, could you wash these bottles? They've been piling up. First, I didn't mind. I was happy to help. But soon it felt less like I was a grandmother visiting her grandchild and more like I was the hired help. Sarah, since you're here, could you vacuum the living room? I just haven't had time. Would you mind watching Noah while we go out for dinner? It's been so long since we had a date night. Could you run to the store? We're out of diapers. I always said yes. I told myself I was being supportive. After all, raising a child is hard work, and if I could make their lives easier, why wouldn't I? But as Noah's first birthday approached, the requests became demands, and the gratitude disappeared entirely. One Friday evening, I arrived at their house with a gift for Noah. A little stuffed elephant I'd seen at the store and couldn't resist. Olivia opened the door, already dressed up. "Oh good, you're here," she said, grabbing her purse. "We're running late. Noah just woke up from his nap. There's breast milk in the fridge. We'll be back around 11. Before I could even process what was happening, she and James were out the door. I stood there, still holding the wrapped gift, not even having had the chance to take off my coat. I spent that evening playing with Noah, feeding him, bathing him, and putting him to bed. I didn't mind spending time with my grandson. I treasured it. But being treated like I was available on demand without even a proper request hurt. When they returned, it was nearly midnight. Olivia glanced around the living room. "You didn't clean up his toys," she remarked. Not even a thank you for watching her child for 6 hours with no notice. I felt something twist inside me, but I kept my smile in place. I put him to bed and was just resting a bit. "I'll clean up now." James at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "Mom, you don't have to do that. We can clean up." But Olivia cut in. "It's fine. Sarah doesn't mind, do you, Sarah? After all, grandmothers love to help. That was the first time she called me Sarah, to my face instead of Mom like she used to. It felt deliberate, a way to distance me, to remind me that I was just the grandmother, not really part of their nuclear family. I cleaned up the toys, said my goodbyes, and drove home with tears threatening to spill. But I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe she didn't mean anything by it. But the pattern continued and worsened. One incident stands out clearly in my memory. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they had invited me over for lunch, a rare occurrence by that point. I brought a homemade apple pie, Noah's favorite dessert. As soon as I arrived, Olivia handed me an apron. "I hope you don't mind finishing up the cooking," she said. "I have a headache and need to lie down." Everything started. It just needs to be finished and plated. I found myself alone in their kitchen, cooking a meal I had been invited to eat as a guest. James was in the backyard mowing the lawn, and Olivia was upstairs resting. I could hear her on the phone, laughing with someone. When lunch was ready, I called everyone to the table. Olivia came down, her headache apparently gone, and James came in from outside. As we ate, I tried to engage in conversation, asking about their week. Mid-conversation, Noah started fussing in his high chair. Before I could even react, Olivia said, "Sarah, could you take care of him? My food will get cold." I got up and tended to Noah, my own food left untouched. When I finally sat back down, my plate had been removed. "Oh, I thought you were finished," Olivia said with a shrug. "There's more in the pan if you want to serve yourself." I felt invisible. I felt used. But still I said nothing. I simply got up, served myself another plate, and continued eating in silence while they discussed their plans for redecorating the house. As the months passed, I started making excuses to visit less often. It broke my heart to not see Noah as much, but each visit left me feeling worse than the last. The few times James brought Noah to visit me at my house were precious, but they were always brief and without Olivia. Then came the incident that should have been my breaking point but somehow wasn't. It was a long weekend and James called me on Thursday night. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but Olivia and I have a chance to go to a conference in San Diego. It's last minute, but it could be really good for her career. Could you possibly stay at our place and watch Noah for the weekend? We'd leave tomorrow morning and be back Monday night." Despite how I'd been treated, I agreed immediately. Time alone with my grandson sounded wonderful, and I wanted to help my son. What I didn't know was that this wasn't a professional conference. I discovered the truth when I arrived at their house Friday morning, suitcase in hand for my 4-day stay. Olivia was rushing around, packing swimsuits and sundresses. "Make sure you stick to Noah's schedule," she instructed, barely looking at me. "His foods are labeled in the fridge. Don't give him anything not on the list. And don't take him to your house. He sleeps better in his crib here." "Of course," I replied. "So, what's this conference about?" James looked uncomfortable. "Well, it's not exactly a conference," Olivia interrupted. "It's a couples retreat. For professional couples. There are some networking opportunities." That sounded strange, but I nodded. It was only later, when I was putting Noah down for his nap and checking Facebook on my phone, that I saw Olivia had posted photos. They were already in San Diego on a beach, cocktails in hand. Her caption read, "Much-needed vacation with no responsibilities. Thanks to Grandma babysitting." My heart sank. They had lied to me. They weren't at a conference or a professional retreat. They were on a vacation they had clearly planned in advance, given the resort they were staying at. And Olivia's post made it clear. I wasn't a grandmother helping out in a pinch. I was free childcare they had deliberately misled to get what they wanted. I felt used, deceived, and disrespected. But still I said nothing. I cared for Noah lovingly all weekend, sticking to his schedule, making sure he was happy and comfortable. I even cleaned their house from top to bottom and prepared meals for them to have when they returned. When they came back Monday evening, tanned and relaxed, Olivia barely acknowledged my efforts. "The house looks decent," was all she said as she inspected the kitchen. "No thank you for giving up my weekend, for caring for their child, for cleaning their home." James at least gave me a hug. "Thanks, Mom. We really needed that break." I nodded, fighting back tears, and gathered my things to leave. As I was walking out the door, Olivia called after me. "Oh, Sarah. Could you take out the trash on your way? It's starting to smell. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't take out their trash. I simply left, drove home, and cried until I had no tears left. But through those tears, a resolution began to form. I wouldn't be treated this way anymore. I deserved respect, if not as a mother-in-law, then at least as a person. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I began to pay closer attention. I started keeping track of everything. Every dismissive comment, every unreasonable demand, every time I was treated as less than. And I began to notice something else. It wasn't just me. Olivia spoke to James the same way when she thought no one was listening. She dismissed his opinions, mocked his ideas, and treated him more like an employee than a husband. And even more concerning, she was impatient with Noah, often ignoring his needs if they inconvenienced her. I started saving evidence. When Olivia would text me demanding I come over to babysit with no notice, I saved the messages. When she would call and complain about James or about how difficult Noah was being, I recorded the calls, with one-party consent being legal in our state. I wasn't sure what I would do with this evidence. Part of me hoped I'd never have to use it. Perhaps things would improve naturally. Perhaps she would realize how she was acting and change. Perhaps James would stand up for himself, and for me. But none of that happened. Instead, things reached a whole new level when Olivia decided to host a dinner party. It was 3 months after the San Diego incident. I had been gradually reducing my visits, always with polite excuses. I could tell James was confused by my sudden unavailability, but Olivia seemed relieved to have me around less. Then, out of the blue, Olivia called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her tone was different, almost warm, definitely solicitous. "Sarah," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm hosting a dinner party this Saturday and I would love your help. It's really important to me. My sister's husband's parents will be there, and I want to make a good impression." I hesitated. The old me would have immediately agreed. But the new me, the one who had been keeping track of how I was treated, was wary. "What kind of help are you looking for, Olivia?" I asked carefully. "Oh, just helping with the cooking and serving. Your pot roast is amazing and I thought maybe you could make that? And those roasted potatoes everyone loves? And maybe a dessert? I'm really not as good a cook as you are. And this dinner is so important for building relationships with my extended family." There it was. She didn't want me as a guest. She wanted me as the caterer, the server, the invisible help in the background. "And will I be joining the dinner as a guest?" I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a pause. "Well, we have limited seating at the table, but of course you're welcome to have a plate in the kitchen." In the kitchen? Like the help? The old me would have swallowed that insult and agreed anyway. But something had changed in me. I had reached my limit. However, instead of refusing, I did something else. "I'd be happy to help, Olivia," I said smoothly. "What time should I arrive?" She sounded surprised but pleased. "Really? That's great. Could you come around too? That would give you enough time to prepare everything for dinner at 6. 4 hours of cooking and prep as unpaid labor." But I agreed pleasantly. 2 o'clock it is. I'll bring everything I need for the pot roast and dessert." After hanging up, I sat quietly for a long time, thinking about what I was about to do. Was it the right choice? Was it the kind thing to do? But then I remembered how I'd been treated, how my kindness had been exploited, how my role as grandmother had been reduced to that of an occasional convenience. The next few days I prepared, but not in the way Olivia expected. I reached out to James's cousin, who had witnessed some of Olivia's behavior toward me at family gatherings. I spoke with my friend who had been present during one particularly humiliating incident where Olivia had made me rewash dishes I'd already cleaned because they weren't up to her standards. I even contacted Olivia's sister, with whom I'd always had a surprisingly good relationship, and carefully broached the subject of how Olivia treated others. What I discovered confirmed what I'd suspected. Olivia's behavior toward me wasn't isolated. She treated many people this way when she thought she could get away with it. Her sister wasn't surprised at all by my stories. In fact, she shared some of her own. By Saturday morning I was ready. Not just with ingredients for cooking, but with something else entirely. I arrived at their house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying bags of groceries. Olivia let me in, already dressed impeccably for the dinner party, not a hair out of place. "Oh good, you're here," she said, checking her watch. "The table needs to be set, and I've laid out my grandmother's china in the dining room. Be very careful with it. It's irreplaceable." And I wrote down the menu and schedule. Everything needs to be ready by 6 sharp. She handed me a detailed schedule and menu, then added, "I'll be getting ready and handling some last-minute details. James is out picking up wine and will be back soon. Noah is napping upstairs. If he wakes up, could you keep him occupied? I don't want him underfoot while I'm getting ready." With that, she disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with her list of demands. I looked at the schedule she'd created. She had allotted specific times for each dish, calculated down to the minute when things should go into the oven or be taken out. There was even a notation about when I should be out of sight as guests arrived. I set down my grocery bags and took a deep breath. Then I began to cook, following her schedule perfectly. I prepared the pot roast, peeled potatoes, made a salad, and baked a beautiful apple crumble for dessert. The house filled with delicious aromas. James came home and seemed surprised to see me. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming today. Olivia asked me to help with dinner," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. A look of discomfort crossed his face. "You didn't have to do that. We could have handled it." "It's no problem," I assured him. "I'm happy to help." But as I said those words, I knew they were no longer true. I wasn't happy to help. Not like this. Not as an unpaid servant who would be hidden away when the real guests arrived. As the afternoon progressed, I continued cooking while also setting the table with Olivia's grandmother's china, polishing glasses, and arranging flowers. Olivia came down occasionally to check on my progress, always finding something to critique or adjust. "The napkins should be folded differently," she instructed at one point. "Like this, see? It's more elegant." I nodded and refolded all 12 napkins according to her preference. Noah woke up from his nap, and James brought him downstairs. My grandson's face lit up when he saw me, and he toddled over, arms outstretched. I picked him up and hugged him close, savoring the moment. "Don't let him mess up your clothes," Olivia warned as she came into the kitchen. "And don't let him touch anything in the dining room. Those figurines on the sideboard are valuable." I bounced Noah on my hip and continued working with one hand, managing to stay on schedule despite the additional challenge. James offered to take him, but Noah clung to me, and selfishly, I wanted these few precious moments with my grandson. By 5:30, everything was ready. The table was set beautifully, the food was prepared and warming, the house was spotless, and even Noah was bathed and dressed in an adorable little outfit Olivia had laid out. "You should get going now," Olivia said, checking her watch. "Guests will be arriving soon." I looked at her in surprise. I thought I was staying to serve the meal? She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Oh well, we can handle it from here. I just thought you might be tired after all the cooking." Translation. She didn't want me present when her important guests arrived. I was good enough to cook the food but not good enough to be seen. "Actually," I said calmly, "I think I will stay. I'd like to make sure the pot roast is served properly. It needs to rest for exactly the right amount of time." Olivia's smile tightened. "That's really not necessary." But she was interrupted by the doorbell. The first guests had arrived early. "Fine," she hissed. "But please stay in the kitchen unless you're serving." I nodded agreeably and stepped back into the kitchen as she went to greet her guests. I heard her welcoming voice, warm and charming, so different from how she spoke to me. Over the next half hour, all the guests arrived. I could hear them in the living room chatting and laughing. I recognized some voices, Olivia's sister and her husband, some friends from their circle, and then new voices that must belong to the in-laws Olivia was so eager to impress. James came into the kitchen at one point. "Mom, why don't you join us? You don't have to stay in here." "Olivia asked me to stay in the kitchen," I replied simply. His face flushed. "That's ridiculous. Come on out and have a drink. You've done enough work today." I could see the conflict on his face. He knew something wasn't right, but he hadn't been ready to confront it until now, seeing me relegated to the kitchen after cooking the entire meal. "I'll come out in a bit," I promised. "You go ahead." He hesitated, then returned to the guests. I could hear Olivia's voice rise slightly in what sounded like a question or concern. but I couldn't make out the words. At exactly 6 o'clock, I began serving the meal. I carried platters to the dining room, setting them on the sideboard as Olivia had instructed. The guests were seated around the table, with Olivia at one end and James at the other. Noah was in a high chair next to James. As I set down the main course, the pot roast that had been cooking to perfection all afternoon, Olivia smiled tightly at me. "Thank you, Sarah. That will be all." The way she dismissed me like hired help rather than family made something in me snap. But I kept my composure. Now wasn't the time. Not yet. I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I found the plate Olivia had set aside for me. It was on the counter, not even properly set with utensils or a napkin. Just a plate, as if I should eat standing up while everyone else dined in comfort. I didn't touch the food. Instead, I waited, listening to the conversation flowing from the dining room. Olivia was in her element, charming everyone, taking credit for the meal I had prepared. "This pot roast is divine," I heard one of the guests say. "Thank you," Olivia replied. "It's an old family recipe I've perfected over the years." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. The blatant lie should have angered me, but instead, it only confirmed what I was about to do was necessary. After the main course, I prepared to serve dessert, the apple crumble with vanilla ice cream. As I entered the dining room with the dessert tray, Olivia was in the middle of a story about how challenging it was to balance her career with being such a hands-on mother. "It's all about organization and priorities," she was saying. "Noah is always my first priority, of course." I set the dessert down silently and began serving. When I reached Noah, I noticed his plate from dinner was barely touched. He looked tired and a bit fussy. "Has he eaten?" I asked James quietly. Before he could answer, Olivia cut in. "He's fine. He had a late snack before dinner." But I could see Noah was hungry. As I was about to serve the next guest, Noah reached for me, saying "Gamma" in his sweet little voice. I smiled at him, but Olivia shot me a warning look. "Sarah, could you bring more wine from the kitchen?" she asked pointedly. I nodded and returned to the kitchen, bringing back the wine as requested. As I poured for the guests, Olivia's sister Kate looked at me with a small frown. "Sarah, aren't you joining us for dessert?" she asked. Olivia jumped in before I could respond. "Oh, Mom prefers to eat in the kitchen. She's more comfortable there." The casual mom thrown in for the guests' benefit, when she hadn't called me that in private for over a year, was the final straw. I placed the wine bottle down carefully. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I was told there wasn't room at the table for me." A sudden hush fell over the room. Kate's eyes widened and she looked at Olivia, who forced a laugh. "That's not what I meant at all. You're welcome to join us, of course." "Am I?" I asked, still calm. "Because earlier you specifically said I could have a plate in the kitchen." James looked shocked. "What?" "Mom, sit down. Of course there's room." Olivia's face had reddened slightly, but she maintained her composure. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I would never suggest you eat in the kitchen." "Sarah, you're being sensitive again." That again hung in the air, implying this was a regular occurrence, that I was frequently oversensitive and misinterpreted her perfectly reasonable statements. Kate was watching this exchange with increasing interest. She and I had spoken earlier in the week, and she knew exactly what was happening. "Sarah," Kate said carefully, "you look so calm. I don't think I've ever seen someone so composed in an uncomfortable situation." That was my cue. The opening I had been waiting for. "Years of practice," I replied with a small smile. "It takes a lot of self-control to maintain composure when you're being treated as less than human." The table went completely silent. Even Noah seemed to sense the tension and stopped fussing. Olivia laughed nervously. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've always treated you with nothing but respect." I saw something flicker in Olivia's eyes. Fear, perhaps, or the realization that this wasn't going to play out the way she expected. "I think you should go home, Sarah," she said, her voice low but firm. "You're clearly upset about something, and this isn't the time or place." I looked around the table at the uncomfortable guests, at my son's confused face, at little Noah who was watching me with curious eyes. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe this wasn't the place. Maybe I should just leave, swallow my pride once again, and walk away. But then I remembered all those moments, being asked to eat in the kitchen, being treated like a servant, being lied to about that conference in San Diego. I thought about how Olivia had taken credit for my cooking just minutes earlier, about how she dismissed me in front of everyone. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I will go home. Not yet." I reached for my purse, which I'd left on a small table by the wall. From it I took out my phone. "What are you doing?" Olivia asked, her voice sharp now. "I'm simply gathering my evidence," I replied. "Since you seem to have a different recollection of how you've treated me." James stood up. "Mom, what's going on? What evidence?" I looked at my son, feeling a wave of sadness. He had been blind to much of Olivia's behavior, either not present for it or choosing not to see it. But he wasn't a bad person. Just someone who had been manipulated by a master manipulator. "James," I said gently, "for the past 2 years, your wife has been treating me like hired help, not family. Today is just the culmination of a long pattern." "That's ridiculous," Olivia scoffed, but there was a tremor in her voice. "I've always been respectful to you." "Respectful?" I repeated, my voice still calm. "Let me show you what respect looks like in Olivia's world." I opened my phone and pulled up a series of text messages. These are from last month, when Olivia needed a babysitter with no notice. I read aloud. "Sarah, need you to watch Noah tomorrow from 9 to 5. Make sure house is clean before you leave." I scrolled to another. "Don't forget to do the laundry while you're here. Basket is in our room." Another. "The garden needs weeding. Since you'll be here anyway with Noah, you might as well make yourself useful." I looked up from my phone. "No please, no thank you. No acknowledgement that I might have my own plans or life. Just demands." The table was silent. Olivia's face had drained of color. "Those are taken out of context," she said finally. "Are they?" I asked. "Then perhaps we need more context." I pulled up a recorded phone call and played it aloud for everyone to hear. Olivia's voice filled the room. "Honestly, Sarah is so clingy. She thinks just because she's Noah's grandmother, she has some special right to be involved. I keep her around because she's useful, free babysitting, cooking, cleaning, but she needs to understand her place. She's just the grandmother, not part of our immediate family." The recording continued with Olivia laughing, saying, "And you should see how pathetic she looks when I tell her we don't need her help. Like a kicked puppy. But then the next time I call, she comes running. It's almost too easy." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. That's edited," Olivia stammered. "That's not what I said." "I have the full recording," I replied calmly. "Would you like me to play it all? Including the parts where you complain about James being useless as a father? Or the part where you call Noah annoying when he cries?" James was staring at his wife, his face a mask of disbelief and hurt. Olivia turned to him frantically. "She's lying. She's trying to come between us." "Am I?" I asked, still maintaining my composure. "Let's see what other people have to say." I pulled up a video from my phone and played it. It showed Olivia at a family gathering 6 months earlier, when she thought no one was listening. She was talking to her friend in the kitchen, unaware that my friend was nearby, recording because she had noticed Olivia's behavior toward me earlier and wanted evidence. "I have to keep up appearances with James's mom," Olivia was saying in the video. "She's got James wrapped around her finger, and he'd be upset if he knew how I really feel about her. But once Noah is a bit older, I won't need her anymore. She can visit like once a month, supervised, like any other grandparent." I stopped the video and looked directly at Olivia. "Is that taken out of context too? Because I have about a dozen more examples just like it." Olivia's face had gone from pale to mottled red. She looked around the table desperately, seeking an ally, but found none. Even her sister Kate was looking at her with shock and disappointment. "You planned this," Olivia accused, her voice shaking with anger. "You set me up." "No," I replied evenly. "I simply decided to stop being your doormat. I decided to show everyone the real Olivia, not the perfect daughter-in-law and mother you pretend to be." I turned to James, my heart breaking for him. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I should have said something sooner, but I kept hoping things would improve. I kept making excuses for how I was being treated, because I didn't want to come between you and your wife." James looked devastated. He glanced at Olivia, then back at me. clearly struggling to process everything. Is this true? He asked Olivia. Have you been treating my mother this way? Olivia's demeanor changed instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by tears. James, you know how your mother and I have had our differences. She's always been difficult, always wanting to tell us how to raise Noah, always inserting herself into our lives. That's not what I asked, James said, his voice firmer now. Have you been treating her like this? Like she's the help, not family. When Olivia didn't immediately answer, one of the guests, her sister-in-law's father, cleared his throat. I think we should be going, he said uncomfortably, starting to rise from his chair. No, I said quickly. Please stay. This isn't your fault, and you shouldn't have your evening ruined. The food is prepared, and there's plenty for everyone. But the damage was done. The older couple exchanged glances and stood up. Thank you for the invitation, the woman said stiffly. But we'd prefer to leave. As they gathered their things, Kate's husband stood up too. Maybe we should all go, he suggested, looking between Olivia and me. Wait, Kate said, her hand on her husband's arm. Before we go, I think there's something else we should address. She turned to me. Sarah, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. The truth is, Olivia has always been like this, manipulative, using people, treating them as if they exist only to serve her purposes. Olivia gasped. Kate, how dare you? It's the truth, Kate replied, not backing down. You did the same to our parents. You've done it to me. You use people until they're no longer useful, then discard them or treat them like servants. She looked at James. I should have warned you before you married her. We all saw it, but we thought maybe she'd changed or that you knew and accepted it. I'm sorry. James looked shell-shocked. He glanced at Noah, who had started to fuss in his high chair, clearly disturbed by the tension in the room. I moved to take Noah from his high chair. Let me get him ready for bed, I said gently to James. You and Olivia have things to discuss, and the guests should probably go home. As I lifted Noah out, Olivia suddenly snapped, Don't touch my son. The room went silent again. Even Noah seemed startled by his mother's tone. Don't worry, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm just the grandmother, remember? I know my place. I handed Noah to James instead. Maybe you should take him upstairs. James nodded numbly and carried Noah out of the room. The guests began to make their awkward goodbyes, all except Kate and her husband, who stayed seated, watching Olivia with evident disapproval. Once most of the guests had left, Olivia turned on me, her face contorted with rage. You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea how important tonight was? Those were important connections for my career. I didn't ruin anything, Olivia, I replied. You did that all by yourself when you decided to treat me like a servant instead of family. When you lied about that conference in San Diego. When you took credit for my cooking tonight. When you told me to eat in the kitchen while everyone else ate at the table. You're twisting everything, she shouted. You've always been jealous of my relationship with James. You can't stand that he has a life that doesn't revolve around you. I shook my head sadly. That's not true, and you know it. I've always respected your marriage. I've never dropped by unannounced, never given unsolicited advice on how to raise Noah, never tried to come between you and James. All I ever wanted was to be treated with basic dignity and respect. Kate stood up then. Olivia, enough. You've been caught. Stop making it worse by attacking Sarah more. Olivia whirled on her sister. You're taking her side? Your own sister. I'm taking the side of truth, Kate replied firmly. What you did to Sarah is exactly what you've done to everyone in your life who cares about you. You use them, then demonize them when they don't serve your purposes anymore. James returned at that moment, looking grave. Noah's asleep, he said. It took a while to calm him down. He looked at Olivia. We need to talk. Not now, she snapped. Not with them here. Yes, now, he insisted. I've been listening from upstairs. I heard everything, and I heard the recordings too. He looked at me. Mom, is there more? Other recordings or messages that you didn't play? I nodded. Yes, quite a few. I want to hear them, he said firmly. All of them. Olivia's face crumpled. James, you can't seriously be taking her side in this. She orchestrated this whole thing to humiliate me. I'm not taking sides yet, he replied. I want to know the truth. All of it. I felt a wave of relief and pride. This was my son, the thoughtful, fair man I had raised. He wasn't jumping to conclusions. He wanted all the facts. I should go, I said, reaching for my purse. This is between you and Olivia now. I've said what I needed to say. No, James said. Please stay. I want you here while we discuss this. Kate stood up. We'll go though. This is a family matter. She looked at her sister. Olivia, call me when you're ready to talk. After Kate and her husband left, the three of us sat in the dining room, surrounded by half-eaten desserts and the remnants of the dinner party. Let's go to the living room, James suggested. It's more comfortable there. We moved to the living room, James and I sitting on the sofa while Olivia perched on the edge of an armchair, her posture defensive. Now, James said, I want to hear everything. From both of you. For the next hour I played recordings, showed messages, and explained the pattern of behavior I had endured. Olivia alternated between angry denials, tearful justifications, and attempts to paint me as interfering or oversensitive. But the evidence was overwhelming. By the end, even Olivia had stopped arguing, sitting in sullen silence as James processed everything. I had no idea, he said finally, looking at me with deep regret. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to put you in the middle, I explained. You love Olivia and you have a child together. I kept hoping things would improve. But they got worse, he said, not a question but a statement. I nodded. Yes, they got worse. He turned to Olivia. Why? Why would you treat my mother this way? After everything she's done for us? For Noah. Olivia looked at him, her makeup streaked with tears. I felt threatened, okay? She's so perfect, so self-sacrificing. Everyone loves Sarah. I could never measure up, especially in your eyes. You think she's the perfect mother. So you punished her for that? James asked incredulously. I didn't see it that way, Olivia insisted. I just needed to establish boundaries. To make it clear that we were the parents, not her. By having her cook our dinner and then eat in the kitchen? James asked, his voice rising. By using her as free labor? By lying to her about that trip to San Diego? Olivia had no answer for that. She looked away, her jaw tight. James stood up and paced the room. I need time to think about all this. I can't believe I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. You weren't meant to see it, I said gently. Olivia was careful to treat me differently when you weren't around. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. Mom, can you stay here tonight? In the guest room? I don't want you driving home this late, and, well, I'd like you to be here in the morning for Noah. I hesitated, looking at Olivia. I'm not sure that's a good idea. It's fine, Olivia said tightly. It's James's house too. If he wants you to stay, you can stay. I agreed, and James showed me to the guest room. Before leaving, he hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Mom. I promise things will change. As I lay in bed that night, I could hear murmured conversation from their bedroom, occasionally rising into more heated discussion. I felt a mix of emotions, relief that the truth was finally out, sadness for the pain it had caused, worry about what it meant for their marriage and for Noah. But mostly I felt a quiet strength. I had stood up for myself finally. I had refused to be treated as less than I deserved. Whatever happened next, I would face it with dignity. Morning came, and with it a strange sense of calm. I got up early, as was my habit, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. To my surprise, Olivia was already there, sitting at the island with a cup in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Good morning, I said cautiously. She nodded in acknowledgement but didn't speak. I made my coffee and was about to take it back to the guest room when she finally spoke. I'm not going to apologize, she said, her voice low. I still think you manipulated this situation to make me look bad. I turned to face her. I didn't manipulate anything, Olivia. I simply showed the truth. Your version of the truth, she countered. Recordings don't lie, I replied calmly. Neither do text messages. She stared down at her coffee. James is very upset. Yes, I imagine he is. He says. She paused, swallowing hard. He says he needs time to think about our marriage. He says he doesn't know if he can be with someone who would treat his mother the way I treated you. I felt a pang of guilt. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to come between them. That's between you and James. Is it? She asked bitterly. Because it seems like you're right in the middle of it now. Before I could respond, we heard Noah's voice over the baby monitor. Mama! Dada! I'll get him, Olivia said quickly, standing up. Let me, I offered. You look exhausted. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine. I went upstairs and found Noah standing in his crib, his face lighting up when he saw me. Gamma! My heart melted as I picked him up. Good morning, sweet boy. Did you sleep well? I changed his diaper and helped him dress, then brought him downstairs. James was in the kitchen now too, making breakfast. The tension between him and Olivia was palpable. There's my big guy, James said, forcing cheerfulness as he took Noah from me. Who wants pancakes? We had an awkward breakfast, making small talk for Noah's benefit. Afterward, James asked if I would watch Noah while he and Olivia talked some more. Of course, I agreed, happy to spend time with my grandson. I took Noah to the backyard and played with him on his little swing set. As he giggled and played, I reflected on the events of the previous night. I hadn't wanted to cause a rift in my son's marriage, but I also couldn't continue being treated the way I had been. There had to be a middle ground, a way forward that respected everyone's dignity. After about an hour, James came outside. Mom, can you come in? Olivia wants to talk to both of us. I picked up Noah and followed James inside. In the living room, Olivia was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture composed. Please sit, she said, indicating the armchair across from her. I sat down with Noah on my lap. He was content to play with a small toy car I had brought outside with us. Olivia took a deep breath. I've been thinking about everything that happened last night, and about what James and I discussed afterward. She looked at me directly. I still don't agree with how you chose to handle this, but I can acknowledge that my behavior toward you has been inappropriate. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was something. I appreciate that, I said. James and I have agreed that we need to make some changes, she continued. For Noah's sake, if nothing else. James nodded. We've decided to try counseling. Both couples counseling and family counseling, including you, Mom, if you're willing. I was surprised but pleased. I think that's a wonderful idea. Olivia looked less enthused but determined. We need to establish healthy boundaries and communication. For all of us. I agree completely, I said. I've always wanted us to be a family. A real family where everyone is treated with respect. That's what we all want, James affirmed. And we're going to work on making that happen. I bounced Noah on my knee. What does this mean for now? For today. James and Olivia exchanged glances. For today, James said. We thought maybe we could all go to the park. Together. Start fresh. I'd like that, I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. Olivia nodded. I'll get Noah's bag ready. As she left the room, James came over and kissed the top of my head. Thank you for being so strong, Mom. I know this hasn't been easy. It hasn't, I agreed. But nothing worthwhile ever is. The weeks that followed weren't easy. There were tense moments, awkward conversations, and the hard work of rebuilding trust. Our first family counseling session was particularly difficult, with Olivia still resistant to acknowledging the full extent of her behavior. But gradually things began to change. The counseling helped us establish clearer communication and boundaries. James became more aware of the dynamics between Olivia and me, often stepping in when he noticed old patterns emerging. Olivia never became the warm, loving daughter-in-law I had initially hoped for. Our relationship remained somewhat formal and careful. But the blatant disrespect stopped. The demands ceased. The manipulative behavior faded. 3 months after the dinner party incident, I received a text from Olivia. It was brief but significant. Would you like to join us for dinner on Sunday? As a guest, not the cook. It wasn't effusive or emotional, but it was a step, and I took it as such. I'd love to, I replied. Should I bring dessert? No need, she texted back. I'm trying that apple crumble recipe you showed me. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes. She was acknowledging my contribution, my expertise, in a way she never had before. When I arrived for dinner that Sunday, there was a place set for me at the table. A proper place with the good china and a neatly folded napkin. Noah had a drawing waiting for me, which he proudly presented as soon as I walked in. "Look, Gamma. Made for you." I hugged him close. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'll treasure it always." Dinner was pleasant if not exactly warm. Olivia was polite, James was attentive, and Noah was delighted to have his grandmother there. After dinner, when I offered to help with the dishes, Olivia surprised me. "Actually," she said, "I thought you might want to give Noah his bath tonight. He's been asking for you to do his bedtime routine." The trust implicit in that offer, letting me handle an intimate part of Noah's care, was not lost on me. "I'd love to," I said, trying not to show how much the gesture meant to me. Later, after Noah was asleep and I was preparing to leave, Olivia handed me a small gift bag. "This is for you," she said, somewhat awkwardly. "Just a small thank you for everything you do for Noah." Inside was a beautiful framed photo of me with Noah, taken at the park a few weeks earlier. I hadn't even realized Olivia had been taking pictures that day. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "This means a lot to me." She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "James and I have been talking. We think it would be good for Noah to spend more time with you. Maybe a regular day each week? He loves being with his grandmother." "I'd like that very much," I replied. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. The relationship between Olivia and me was still a work in progress. The damage done couldn't be erased overnight. But we were moving forward, creating a new dynamic built on mutual respect, rather than exploitation. I had learned something important through this experience. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean destroying relationships. Sometimes it's the only way to build healthy ones. The old me would have continued accepting mistreatment to keep the peace. The new me understood that peace without dignity isn't really peace at all. A year has passed since that fateful dinner party. Our family isn't perfect, no family is. Olivia and I will probably never be best friends. But we've found a way to coexist respectfully, to share our love for Noah and James, to be family in the ways that truly matter. As for me, I've reclaimed my sense of self-worth. I've reconnected with old friends, taken up new hobbies, built a life that doesn't revolve solely around being available whenever my son's family needs me. I'm Sarah, 58 years old, a retired nurse, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who finally learned that she deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. The last time I visited James and Olivia's house, I noticed something new hanging in their living room. A family portrait. In it, James and Olivia sit on either side of Noah, while I stand behind them, my hands resting gently on my son's shoulders. We're all smiling. Real smiles, not the strained ones of people pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's not a perfect portrait of a perfect family, but it's honest. And sometimes honesty is the most beautiful thing of all.